started already. In the Tubten region, I don't know if you know him. He passed away yesterday. He was the one who oversee a lot of the cremation of the High Lamas. Asked for him to oversee his cremation. And children
There you go.
also.
You should be all good.
And he passed away.
And now you can adjust the volume. So you're good.
We're good?
Mm-hmm.
How come I can't see them? Oh, they've still, they haven't got their cameras going yet. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're good.
Okay, there's Bob.
There you go.
Hi. Cheers.
I said, now you have insight.
Or sight, just sight.
Thank you for getting the water. Ah. Hi, David.
Hi, Pende.
Hey, Bobby.
Mm.
So, welcome, everyone. We had a lot of homework, 23, 24, and 25, right? So we actually touched on 23 last week because, you know, that's actually applying the example of the ultimate analysis of the chariot to the person. And, you know, it's the same 7-point analysis. And yeah. And, you know, and first of all, were there any questions about that chapter?
Mm. I don't know if it's about this chapter, but the thing about, what is that? And non-affirming negation.
What about non-affirming negation?
So is there a difference between the Svatantrika and the Prasangika with regards to the emptiness being a non-affirming negation?
No,
There's not a difference.
they both negate their object to be negated, but there's a little difference in the object that's being negated. That's all.
Uh-huh.
A subtle difference. The Svatantrika will negate ultimate reality and true existence, but they don't negate intrinsic reality on the conventional level. Whereas the Prasangika will negate the other two and intrinsic reality, both on an ultimate level and a conventional level. So
the Svatantrika position sounds like it isn't a non-affirming negation, but there should be no part of intrinsic nature that's left.
Well, they apply, when they apply the ultimate analysis, and that leaves you with a mere absence of the object that you're negating.
I see.
A mere absence. But when they're not applying the ultimate analysis,
right,
then you have conventional objects, and they don't say that the appearance of inherent existence for conventional objects is a mistake. They don't say it's a mistake.
Mhm.
You know, they agree with the opponents who, those who believe in true existence and the like. They agree with them that when conventional objects appear, they appear with inherent existence, and that is unmistaken.
Mhm.
So, and that's the difference.
Mhm.
So when it comes to an ultimate analysis, they arrive at a mere negation of
Mhm.
the object to be negated, and that's what's meditated on.
Yeah, and yeah, because it seems like if there isn't anything coming from the side of the object, then how do you distinguish one object from another? So I guess that's,
So when objects appear, they appear differently,
right.
and that difference is sufficient to be able to distinguish one object from another.
Mm.
The very fact that they're dependent arisings, they depend upon different causes and conditions,
Mhm.
and therefore their characteristics are are different.
Mm.
Could be similar, but they're different.
Mm. Right, okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Pende?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Where are you?
Oh, hold on.
Okay. There you
There
are.
we go. So, I mean, I don't get anywhere in meditating on emptiness without identifying the object of negation. Like it doesn't, there's no substance to it, right? Because I need to find that first.
Yes.
What I've been a little bit confused about, I've been told in the past that I'm not identifying the correct object of negation for kind of like the ultimate analysis. So for example, for an object, let's say, being labeled merely by mind. So when we're getting into the subtler parts of understanding emptiness, I guess my question is there a difference from a practical perspective when you're meditating on identifying the object of negation first, and then you go to, go through your analysis? Is there a distinction with what you're identifying as the object of negation first in the different schools? Or is it really experientially the same thing and then the analysis is different?
So it's true that the different schools have different objects of negation.
Okay.
And they are described as from gross to subtle. And so by looking at how the different schools identify, Buddhist schools identify the object of negation,
Yeah.
and even their opponents, how they identify how they believe things exist, then it's helpful in identifying ourselves what the object to be negated is. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, generally speaking, everything that appears to us, all of these objects that appear to us, appear to inherently exist.
Yeah.
So it's not far away. Everything is appearing in a mistaken way. Our job is to identify the mistake.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's something that we need to work on. Okay. Now, studying the insight chapter of the Lamrim Chenmo identifies different descriptions of the objects of negation, and so it provides us with some help, But then on our own, we have to actually try to apply whatever we might have learned or picked up or intuited from the descriptions that we've read here to just common appearances in our life. Like for instance, the other day I was doing that in my meditation session, and an apple appeared in my mind. Okay, an apple appeared, and I said, "Boy, that really looks like an apple." And it doesn't look like I've made it an apple. It looks like an apple from its own side, just like, what do you think, Pende? I'm an apple. It really just was so pronounced, like existing from its own side as an apple with, and so then I applied the 7-point analysis just to be sure that this apple could not exist from its own side with the identity of being an apple. Okay? And then, like if it existed from its own side as an apple, then it would have to be existing identically with all those parts. And so I divided the parts up, there's the skin and the shape, and then there's of course the core and the seeds, and then there's the meat. And then I started cutting it up, there's the meat in front and the meat in back, the meat to the right and the meat to the left. And then of course there's the juice.
Yeah.
We squeeze those apples and make juice. So there's all of these things, and knowing a little bit more, there's the cells of that meat, and so then there's so many things. And if the apple was identical to what's in front of me there, then it would also have to be as many, right? It would have to be as many as all those things. And if it's just one, then all of those things would have to stop being plural and be one thing, right?
Yeah.
So, and then, I use, and those are the two main analyses. Then you can add on, is the apple possessing the parts, and does the parts depend on the apple, or does the things like that, and is it the combination of the parts and spread the parts over the floor, having thoroughly, having crushed them and squeezed out the juice, and where's the apple? And then put them all together and said, well, if there was nothing there under such a dissection, then all the same things are there in a combination. There's no apple there. And so, I'm left with the thought that no matter how strongly it appears to have an identity from its own side, its identity does not inhere inside that thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that was, and it's like that. You have to, and in one of the later chapters, I don't know if it was I think it was the 25th chapter, which is talking about the necessity of analysis. We have to get so familiar with the analysis, doing it all the time. Even when we meditate, it says analyze, keep analyzing. It's a wrong view to think that analysis is done when you're listening to teachings and thinking about the content of those teachings, but when you meditate, you just place your mind and don't analyze. And Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, well, what are you placing your mind on if you're not placing it on what you're analyzing? So you have to be analyzing all the time. And you start getting really fast, right? Because you're so familiar with analyzing that you can just analyze in a moment and boom. And when you do analytical meditation like this with the analysis, it's not only the mere appearance, no, the mere absence of the inherently existing object that appears to the mind. It is also the basis of imputation that appears. So all the parts of the apple, all of that would also appear, as well as the mere negation of the inherently existing apple. And that same thing happens when you analyze yourself, right? As your personal identity. The mere absence of an inherently existing personal identity appears, but appears together with the aggregates, the body, the mind, all of those things appear. That's a characteristic of of applying the ultimate analysis conceptually. Okay, so don't try to, if the basis of imputation is appearing at the same time, don't think you're doing something wrong. It's expected that both the mere absence of inherent existence and the basis of imputation will be appearing
Okay.
like that. So, so inherent, what does inherent mean? What does intrinsic mean? It's there within the basis of imputation, right? It's in the parts. It's abiding there, and if the other, or it's completely separate from the parts, and it's abiding there objectively. Except that's an easy one to negate, because we can't identify whatever the object is independent of its parts, right? We always identify the object by depending upon the appearance of its parts, like that.
Okay.
So yeah, look for those familiar objects, like my apple.
Because it always seems to me like it's finding the object of negation and holding it that is, I mean, maybe not 90% of it. It seems like it's 75% of this process is being able to hold it and then analyze, because it's like I can find it and then I can't hold it, right? Because my mind doesn't stay stable. So it's yeah. Anyway.
Well, the thing is, it's true but yeah, it's true that when it appears, it can disappear very quickly. It's like I don't know, like a ghost that doesn't want to be seen, and you kind of catch it and you look
Yeah.
at it, it disappears.
Totally.
But as soon as you apply analysis, it will disappear also.
Right.
And that disappearance is something that you try to hold, and then that also disappears quickly, and then we have to analyze again to make it reappear, and then analyze again to make it reappear. You hold it for as long as you can, and then you check, am I just meditating on mere space, or am I meditating on the absence of an inherently existing whatever? But that's why we have to keep doing analysis as well as placement in a meditation session
I see.
until we get, really familiar with it all, so that we can actually, it's even possible to use emptiness of inherent existence as an object to develop calm abiding. But you have to be very familiar with it. It can't be just disappearing. You have to be able to hold it for, what do they say, a sixth of a day?
Definitely not
4
my mind.
hours, at least 4 hours. Yeah.
If only I was there so far.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
okay. Yeah, so for what was it? So like if the person, and there, it's interesting how we use the word self as a synonym of person, and yet we also use the word self meaning inherent existence, right? So you have to be clear about, so if you're meditating on personal emptiness, then you do those first two steps. Is it identical with the aggregates or separate from the aggregates? And if it's identical with the aggregates, then there are, Buddha Palita, I think, mentions that there's 4 faults with being identical with the aggregates. One of which is that it would be senseless to think of the person as something different from the aggregates. Instead, the word person or me or I would be just a synonym for the aggregates, right? And that's not the way our language is used. And that's a significant a point, because I remember one time I was reading a book on the mind-body identity problem. And one of the most coherent, and it had different authors giving their own presentation. And there was, one of them was a respected philosopher. And his point was simply that when we say mind, we don't mean the brain. That's just the way it is. That's the way our language is. When we say mind, we don't mean the brain. When we say I know, we don't mean the mind is, the brain is firing away. And when objects are appearing to the mind, we don't mean objects are appearing inside the brain. We use the terms differently. And that's just the way our language is. And that is also why you had various psychologists, what's his name? One was Watson, who was insisting that we change our language, that we change the way we don't use the word mind anymore. We don't use the word I know anymore. It's now the mind is, the brain is functioning. He was trying so hard to make that change, but nobody would agree. It's just maybe in his own laboratory, in order to get paid, they had to agree. So it's an important point, and that's even, it comes up a lot in this chapter, that you can't just ignore the conventional or the customary use of language. You have to keep that. So, if somebody's complaining that why did you leave the dishes in the sink? And you said, I don't see any dishes in the sink. There's a mere absence of dishes in the sink. You might get one of those dishes in the head. So, you can't use these ultimate analyses to violate conventional or customary use of language. So yeah, so that was one point, and I read that point so many times, kind of ignoring it almost, but then it really struck me. Hey, that's a significant point. Remember when you read that one book, and the only author whose paper was included in the book that you liked was the author who said, you can't just, our language does not make the brain and mind, the same. Like that. So then the second point is the one of, if it's identical with the aggregates, then it has to be many, or the aggregates has to be one. And that's, that also doesn't work. And then the other point was that he made was that then the person would arise and disintegrate like the aggregates do. And there were 3 faults for that. One was that then the Buddha would have been lying to us when he reported his past lives, like in the Jataka tales, stuff like that, because the idea is that if the person inherently exists, and that's the one we're analyzing, right? The inherently existing person, it's something that exists in its own right through its own essence, right? And if that ceases, because if it ceases and no longer exists, then you can't refer. Then the current person can't remember that past person because, and it's like they give the name of, well, it would be like me remembering a memory of Bob. We're both two different persons, and because we're different, I can't remember his experiences as if they were mine. They're not. And similarly, the inherently existing person of the past that ceased is as different from the currently existing me that's present as Bob is from me, like that. So then the Buddha's, all those stories he gave about his past lives would be lies. And the Buddha doesn't lie, you know. I mean, that's one thing, you know, as a teacher, I often run into problems about, you know, things I can't prove. Like that the Buddha didn't lie. But, you know, that's something we accept, and you have to read lots of sutras to be able to find those moments where he didn't even exaggerate.
Mhm.
And if he didn't want to answer a question in the wrong way, he wouldn't talk. And yet at the same time, he's responsible for the Chittamatra point of view. And, you know, when some sutras, and you say, well, it seems like he told a lie. No, he didn't lie. He was actually helping people avoid falling into extremes, but giving them a little foothold to avoid the extreme, but getting closer to reality. So because lying implies, you know, a selfish motive like that. So, yeah, okay. And then if somebody says, well, when the Buddha said, I was the son of King so-and-so, my mother's name was so-and-so, and I did this, that, and the other thing, does he mean that person that he's remembering and the current person now are one and the same? And he doesn't mean that, because, you know, that previous one was a bodhisattva, and the current one is a Buddha. And there's a big difference from being a bodhisattva and being a Buddha. But there is a continuum, right? There is a continuum. And when you generate the thought I on the basis of the continuum, then you can speak about when I in the past when I did this and did that, and there is a sameness, not ultimately the same, but there's a sameness between the past I and the current I when you're generating the I on the basis of the continuum. Is that, yeah, that's, and of course, inherently existing I's don't form a continuum. Because the continuum has to be, it's a process. It's a process, whereas an inherently existing thing exists in its own right. There's no process involved. It doesn't come from causes, it doesn't produce effects, it exists in its own right. And so you can't make a continuum out of it. There's no second moment of it. It exists wholly in its own right. Whereas, you know, a continuum has a relationship of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, like that. One moment arising from the previous moment, giving rise to the next moment. There's a continuum. So then the second consequence would be that actions would be lost. So one of the general characteristics of karma is that no actions are lost, right? If you create an action, then that leaves an imprint in your mind, and that imprint never goes away until it ripens, unless you purify it. But it doesn't like disintegrate over time, like an iceberg. There's no force that kind of dissolves it over time, because it's in the mind. The mind is formless, so it doesn't go away. But if the person is inherently existing and it ceases, then the actions done by that former person have nothing to do with anything that follows. So the effects of actions done by that person that have not yet been experienced by that person disappear. They disappear. And then the third point is that the person now, all the experiences that they have are derived from former actions, right? From former actions give rise to present experience. That's another general characteristic of karma. But the current person inherently exists, and the former persons inherently exist. So there's no relationship between the two, and therefore, whatever experiences you get are created by somebody totally different. Totally different. Like I would be getting the karmic consequences of what Toby did in her former lifetime.
Uh-oh. For you.
Like that. So, so those are the big points that Buddha Palita brings up. And then in addition to that, Lama Tsongkhapa talks about agent and object. That there would, if the person was the same as the aggregates, then there would be no difference between agent and object. And what that means is, like, if you use the example of a woodcutter. So the woodcutter is the agent of the action of cutting wood, and the object that action is being applied to is the wood. And we speak about a difference between the agent and the object, right? The woodcutter and the wood. There's an obvious difference. And if we think that the person is the same as the aggregates, then that breaks down, because then the person would not be the appropriator of the aggregates. And of course, this word appropriator, I've only used it in the context of Buddhist studies. But, there's a simple word too. The person acquires, or the person has the aggregates. Okay, has is also a verb. It's an action verb, to possess, like that. So then there would be no difference. And there's other absurd examples that you use, such as fire being the agent of burning wood. So there would be no difference then between the fire and the wood if the agent and the object were the same. So that was an additional point that Tsongkhapa threw in there. And so there's, it's like at least 7 different reasons that one can refute the object that you're analyzing and its basis of basis of designation. Yeah, and then if one starts to accept that something is merely designated on a basis, then the object designated and the basis of designation cannot be the same, right? Can't be the same. So that would be like the forest is designated on the basis of trees. Okay, so and trees is just plural of individual trees, right? So many trees, and forest is a mere designation on, a collection of trees, like that. So it can't be the same. Otherwise, if you see a collection of trees, you'd immediately, oh, that's a forest, without ever having learned to use the word. So like that. So we use that 7-point analysis to understand that this object, one's self, one's person, this personal identity that we refer to when we use pronouns such as me or I. I'm having a little trouble with the use of the pronoun they for me. Just my own, dogmatic negative mind. But in any case, when we use the word I or me, we're thinking, I'd like to do this, I'd like not to do that, and so on. What are we referring to with that word? So that is what we're analyzing. And where is it? Does it exist in its own right, appearing to the mind, and we just give it a name? Or is it something that we create with language and thought? And yes, Bob.
Well, go on and finish what you were, because I'm going to
That's
a little.
good enough.
If Pende that started at 7 o'clock is a truly existing Pende, then the Pende that's here at 7:35 or whatever, it's just a totally different Pende.
It would be, yeah, totally different.
So if it's a part of a continuum, then the Pende that was a monk in this life and the last life and the life before is just part of one continuous continuum.
Yeah, if there's a continuum, then it couldn't be inherently existing. Couldn't be truly existing, because you can't have a continuum of inherently existing things.
Right. So the second question I have is like, it has to do with my good friend Hoshan or Hashan. Okay. So the question I have is, you do the 7-point analysis, and you come to a conclusion, and that conclusion becomes, let's say, what's the word? I always try to forget. You were told me, and I did this today. A non-affirming negation,
Right.
and you end up in that place, and then Hoshan, he does that same analysis, and he ends up in a blank mind space that is free of anything. It's just like a blank state of mind. So as between those two, one's improper, the other may be proper, but how do you distinguish between the two, and how do we come to the conclusion that Hoshan, which is the wrong conclusion?
So they're very different. So Hoshan was saying that like the mind that believes that that believes in inherent existence, that's a concept, right? That's a conceptual mind. You agree?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a conceptual mind. And so Hoshan was saying that all conceptual minds are obscuring reality, and they are false, and they have to be abandoned. And so, and because of that, then his meditation is focused on not forming any concepts. So because concepts are the obstacles, concepts are the bad guys. So you go into a meditation where you form no concepts. You do not allow the mind to form ideas. And that's very different from what is meditated on from the Prasangika point of view, because the object that's being meditated on is an idea. It's the idea of the emptiness of inherent existence. And from the Prasangika point of view, and Kamalashila's point of view, who debated with Hoshan, that not all concepts are obstacles. take, for example, the spirit of enlightenment, bodhicitta. That's a concept too. And without bodhicitta, you don't have the Mahayana. So if you abandon all concepts, you abandon the Mahayana. And if you abandon the Mahayana, you also abandon the Hinayana. Because without the Mahayana Buddha, you don't have the Hinayana path taught by you. So you lose everything.
So you're saying if you don't have, well, I was thinking about this thing. If you don't have bodhicitta, you can't, even if you would be able to realize emptiness, it's like you didn't get there. I mean, you got there, but you didn't get all the way. I don't know what I want to say. It just,
Yeah, without bodhicitta, even a yogi who has a direct experience of emptiness is not on the Mahayana path, and therefore is not creating the causes to achieve Buddhahood. And even a bodhisattva who has the direct realization of emptiness, without concepts such as bodhicitta and other concepts of loving kindness, compassion, and so on, can't engage in the method side of the path of the Mahayana and can't create the causes for the form body of a Buddha.
Can't you feel love and compassion without ideas?
What do you think?
It seems like I could.
So when you say a
Feel
feeling,
love and compassion without words, anyway.
isn't that the Tonglen in a way?
well, in order to certainly there are things that you can perceive directly without conceptual thought, right? Without concepts. And you can perceive sentient beings suffering, right? You can perceive them directly. You know, by what you're perceiving when you say we're perceiving them suffering is you're perceiving their expressions on their face. You're perceiving how their limbs are moving. You're perceiving the color of their skin. You're perceiving various wounds that they may have, stuff like that. And those are objects of the visual consciousness. And you can hear sounds as well that our ear consciousness, you know, loud sounds, soft sounds, wailing sounds, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But then the thought that they are suffering also arises. And then you
Mhm.
experience the empathy and the giving rise to compassion
I just wonder
is
if
wanting to do something about it, right?
uh-huh,
Compassion is wanting to do something about it,
uh-huh.
and that's a thought.
What to do is definitely a thought.
Yeah,
That's definitely a thought. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it just seems to me like it's what they say in some books is what you need to get rid of is conceptual elaboration.
yeah, but those elaborations are the elaboration of inherent existence. That's what needs to be eliminated. And one time I asked one of my teachers, Geshe Techuk, I said, well, once a person becomes a Buddha, following on something that he had said, that the Buddhas don't have conceptual thought anymore, it's all direct perception. I said, well, it sounds like then they don't have bodhicitta.
Hmm.
And then his reply was, well, that would be strange, wouldn't it?
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of strange things that are when we're dealing with a Buddha and their attainment and how they view the world and all those kind of things, it all becomes kind of strange because it's different. It's very different from our, so it's kind of hard to conceive. But on the one hand, we can say that their mind is so thoroughly trained that becomes their natural response.
Hmm.
But from our level, yeah, without ideas, we can't engage in the method aspect of the path.
Right.
And the path has two aspects, wisdom and method. And you need both, just like a bird needs both wings to fly. So Hashan, his idea was the consequence of that, Kamalashila was saying, would be the complete elimination of the path to both liberation and enlightenment.
Hmm.
And poor Kamalashila, he was assassinated before he returned to India because of having defeated Hashan.
He was assassinated.
Yeah.
Oh. Huh. Wow.
By
And one
both
story is
now,
that Hashan killed himself because he was so upset that he lost the debate. And then his students were so upset with Kamalashila for beating him. But it didn't happen all at once because Kamalashila also wrote the three, what is it? The three
Stages of
meditate, huh?
Stages of meditation.
Stages of meditation, the Gomrim. There were 3 volumes of that he wrote, in which he described all of the ideas which were the basis that he used to for the debate, and to try to eliminate this the popular teaching of Hoshan.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
It's off subject in a way. But
Off subject?
It's not maybe off subject. I was thinking about bodhicitta, and you go through all beings have been my mother and wanting to help them and how do I help them, things like that. But it seems like that to me, that's that can be done very quickly. And then it seems to me like maybe the real practice is doing the Tonglen. So maybe you would care to comment on that.
So what is it? It's the 6-point method of cultivating bodhicitta, right? Where I don't know whether it's 5 causes and 1 effect or something like that, right? But the effect is that you generate the thought of achieving Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings, right? That's the effect. And the other method of generating bodhicitta of with of the equality of all living beings, the disadvantages of the self-cherishing thought, the advantages of cherishing others, and then engaging in the practice of taking and giving, right? And that's general, but those 4 practices themselves don't include bodhicitta, right? But on the basis of practicing the last one of taking and giving, what are you left with? You're left with the idea that I really meant everything that I thought, but it didn't change anything, did it? in order to really make a change, I'm going to have to become a Buddha. So that 4-step method gives rise to the additional step of generating the thought to become a Buddha.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
You had mentioned the difference between just simply labeling, coming up with a word for something versus being merely labeled by mind. And
Right.
it's something that comes up for me often when thinking about emptiness. And so if I understand correctly, the distinction is the object of negation, essentially. Is that right? Because one, you're just labeling something that's inherently existent. The other one, you're coming up with a word for something you see as inherently existent, whereas the other approach, the merely labeled by mind. Does that make sense, the question? I can try to rephrase if it doesn't.
Well, one thing that you have to be aware of is that when we say that objects are merely labeled, it doesn't mean that we're just applying a name to the object. Like there's a real apple there, and then we give the name apple to that. No. When something, there's more involved than just the name. There's the concept that applies the name to an object, the object that the concept forms. Okay, and our language uses words to imply an object, right? We use a word to imply an object. The word is not the object. There's a difference between me and the word Pende. You agree? And yet I'm Pende. So that means the word Pende is applied to an object. And that object is created by thought. Okay? So, and that's why I am different from this body and mind. I am different from the body and the mind. And the labeling process, which involves the use of language, which not only involves a sound or several syllables, like 2 syllables of the sound Pende, but because it's a word, it indicates an object. Necessarily, within the use of language, it's a sound that indicates an object. So, and what object is it? It's an object that's created by our thought. Okay, so when we say that things are merely labeled, then it's labeled by depending upon this process, this conceptual process, and that uses language, which, and there are rules to the use of language, and that creates the object. Okay? And as opposed to the object already existing there and appearing to our mind through the force of its own existence. You see the difference?
I think so, because I always get stuck on this thought that, just because, let's say somebody doesn't have language, right? You're a little baby, right? Something like that. It's not like you've realized emptiness, right? So the capacity to use language is not what's keeping us ignorant, right? In that sense, right? And so
so once you learn language, then your thought process employs it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah.
in the pre-language state of such as an infant or animals, they still have a thought process, but it doesn't use language or very limited language.
That's helpful. So it is the thought process. If I can think about it, merely labeled by mind is simply the thought process, not the language. That helps a lot.
Yeah. So, but once a person learns the language, then their thought process employs the language to think of the object. Otherwise it's, like the Prasangika, they say that everything that appears to ordinary beings necessarily appears as if it inherently exists. So that means that even for a wolf, when a deer appears to it, the deer will appear to inherently exist. And then its concept just agrees. It just assents to that appearance. And similarly to itself, if the wolf, when it views itself, like I'm hungry, it feels the pain of hunger, and then this appears to truly exist, and it assents to that. It just agrees to that. Whereas a person with language, there's more things that we create with our language, more subtler things that because we make up names for everything. And the more intelligent, and a person with fine discrimination will make up things that they are appearing to them that have not been identified before in in scholarly journals. So then they have the opportunity to create a name and help boost their salary.
Awesome. Thank you, Pende.
Okay. So the next chapter deals with the emptiness of phenomena, right? And sometimes the emptiness of phenomena, like there's two emptinesses, the emptiness of the person and the emptiness of phenomena. And sometimes it's referred to as the emptiness of the person and the emptiness of what belongs to the person, like that. Sometimes it refers like that, because what belongs to the person would be the aggregates. So the aggregates would be part of the phenomena and everything else, right? And so you can use the 7-point analysis on also to identify the emptiness of phenomena.
Chapter 24, you're referring to?
Huh?
You're referring to chapter 24?
Yeah. Objects lack intrinsic nature.
Mhm.
You can use the 7-point analysis. And of course, the 7-point analysis employs a lot of unwanted consequences, right? If it's identical with its parts, then it has to be as many as the parts, or the parts have to become one. That's an unwanted consequence, right? But you can also use a syllogism, or especially when you're using the syllogism in your own mind to debate with yourself, and there the reasoning that he employs is the reason of dependent arising. So for instance, a moment of mind is empty of inherent existence because it's a dependent arising, like that. So whatever is dependent arising is empty of inherent existence, and whatever is inherently existing cannot be a dependent arising. There's the 3 points that a valid reason has to have. So is that moment of consciousness a dependent arising? Yes, because it depends upon its causes. What causes? Well, it depends upon a valid sense faculty. It depends upon an object, and it depends upon a previous moment of mind, like that. So you can use such a syllogism also in your analysis to refute the possibility of objects other than the person being inherently existing. So we can deal with that a little more next week. But also read chapter 25.
Is next week,
No.
next week the last week?
Is it? No,
No,
it's not. No,
no.
because we need to do chapter 25 and 26. Chapter 27 is just a summary of the whole Lam Rim in like 3 pages.
Oh,
It's,
Good.
it's worthy of its own meditation, you know. But I learned something about from studying chapter 25. I learned that a lot of my meditation was wrong. That because analysis is so important.
Hmm.
So anyway, please have a good look at it, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about emptiness. And you know, it's not sure we know it unless we can actually speak about it, and that what we're speaking about is reasonable and conforms to what the great Pandits of India and Tibet had to say. So it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Pende.
Thank you.
Okay, let me stop that.
what's that other
Stop.
lady?
I have not.
I think that red color thing to end, is that red color thing at the left, bottom left?